What's up, heathens? How are y'all doing today? I'm doing pretty good. And today we're sitting here with the Godless Iowan. If you don't know him, he's pretty active on Twitter. He's also got a YouTube channel that you can go and check out and subscribe to right fucking now. He also puts out like a weekly top videos list through Twitter and on his website. So, yes, Casey, you have made the list several times. She was video of the week this week, so go check out Godless Iowan right now. Godless Iowan, I don't know if you want to use any other kind of name, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, no, the pleasure's all mine. I love talking to people about their religious history and everything, even if it's like the most mundane of things. But I know that your story really isn't all that mundane, really. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about like yourself to start off with, like now, like what you're doing with your atheist activism and everything like that.
Well, basically, I'm 34 years old, and I was a minister for a while, and I when I left the faith, I didn't want anything to do with religion or anything like that, and over time, I just started seeing more and more in the news where religion was just pervasive and was, kind of seems like they're taking a bigger stand now, especially in politics and things like that. So I decided to start my blog and kind of tell my story. And over time, that turned into me joining Twitter and, eventually the YouTube channel. I don't know what I'm doing, but that's what I'm doing.
Well, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's really great that people are starting to, stand up and use their voice in the community to really push back against, all of this Christian, I guess, overreach that we've really been seeing in the past while. And all that lovely persecution that they've been suffering. So now, why don't you take us through, your religious history? Like when you were a child, what kind of role did religion play in your life?
Religion was the main role in my life growing up. My great grandfather was a minister, my grandfather was a minister, and my parents were a traveling singing group that went around church to church and sang songs. And so I was in church 3 to 5 days every week. We were Pentecostal and Bible believing and tongue talking. And no, I mean, when I was about a year and a half, I had a seizure in a church, and my grandfather prayed over me, and he had been out of the ministry for a little bit and told God that he would go back in if he healed me. Well, he healed me, and then a short time after that, he prophesied over me that I was going to be the next Elijah.
Okay, this has gotten interesting real quick.
Yes.
You're the next Elijah. Like
Yeah,
I thought.
like I'm gonna have double the power that Elijah did, is what he always said.
So you're like two Elijahs crammed
Yes.
together, and like instead of, let's see, was it Elijah that raised the woman or the small boy from the dead?
By laying on top of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how that story was actually originally told. I think he was maybe caught doing something, but
No, she wasn't dead. No, she was alive the entire time. I promise.
but yeah, I mean, religion was just always there. I was never given a choice of being a Christian. That was just what we were. And we were definitely Pentecostals, and everybody outside the Pentecostal church was going to hell.
Well, I mean that seems to be the general consensus of just about any particular denomination.
Yeah.
So,
Got it right. We are the only ones.
yeah, exactly. I mean that God waited up until that point to give the true faith. I mean that's I mean yeah, it's standard.
Yeah.
um Now I'm kind of curious, like what distinguishes Pentecostals from the other denominations?
Well, probably the first thing to get out of the way is not all Pentecostals are snake handlers. A lot of people think that. We weren't snake handlers, but the thing about Pentecostals is they're very, very much into the baptism of the Holy Spirit and the physical workings of the Spirit.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
The physical workings of the Spirit can be miraculous healings, which are generally explained by something natural, but they mostly is speaking in tongues and dancing around the church.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Casey and I have been going through the Bible, and we actually got to our first speaking in tongues in what was it, Numbers? It was in Numbers when Moses was like bitching to God about having to do all of this work and he needs help. And so it's like, all right, listen, I'm going to make 70 horcruxes of my spirit from your spirit, and we're going to put them into these fucks, and you're going to know which ones because they're just going to start talking in tongues. Like,
Yeah.
is that where that comes from, or is there like other scripture?
There's scriptures in the Old Testament, like the one you spoke of, and there's other scriptures where people get the Spirit prophesy in the Old Testament and things like that. But mostly it comes from the book of Acts, and it's after Jesus had died and had been resurrected and floated off into heaven. The he basically tells the disciples, "Go to this church, sit and wait." And so they do this, and they go and they sit and wait, and then a wind rushes through the area. People see fire on top of people's heads, and they all start talking in tongues. Yeah.
I mean,
And I kid you not, I've been in services where people said, "Did you see the fire floating over that person's head?" And
really?
yeah. Yeah.
It's like if their head's on fire, you might want to put that shit out there. Like, we don't need no Michael Jackson up in here getting his weave all fucking fucked up.
It's a holy fire. It's gonna burn you. Oh.
So okay, so basically God farts on the people and they all start speaking in tongues. I mean, that I
Pretty
don't know
much.
why that's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, why? Why?
um Go ahead.
I was going to say, in most Pentecostal churches, unless you've spoken in tongues, they won't allow you to enter into any form of the ministry. That's the first sign that you've gotten the Spirit and that you're ready to be a part of the ministry or a real part of the church.
Right. Now I have talked with several people that have been part of that type of Christianity. Like most notably the anti-ordinary that I recently interviewed. She said that she just started talking in tongues just because everybody else was. Do you think that there's a lot of like, going along with the group and speaking in tongues and later on saying that, oh, I was Jesus stuck his dick up inside me and then I just started speaking in tongues? Like, I mean, do you think that's possible?
Oh, I think a lot of that is possible. When you like, I received the baptism of the Spirit when I was 10 or 11 the first time, and it's a horrifying experience in a lot of churches. You have all these older people surrounding you. They're all shouting different ways that you're supposed to get it. You're supposed to cry out or be silent. You're supposed to stand up, sit down, kneel, raise your hands, put your hands down, cry, don't cry. They're all screaming at you, and eventually you just start babbling.
I think that I would, if I was part of the crowd, I'd be tempted to be like, just do fucking anything, just stand there and get the Holy Spirit. Like, it's what it seems like. It's just stand there, look stupid, and then all of a sudden start speaking in tongues. Like,
That's basically it. I mean, if you can speak in tongues, you are a holy person. You're considered a part of ministry in Pentecostalism. You're not a minister, but you're ready to go out and preach the gospel to your friends and family. So you just go into any church, any Pentecostal church, start speaking in tongues, and as long as you're convincing, you're in.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting because I mean nobody can figure out what the fuck you're saying. Like you don't know if that's the devil moving through you or what.
And the other thing that's funny about speaking in tongues is what's called the interpretation of tongues. And it's not so much anymore because there's a lot more modern churches. But, in years past, like up into the 80s, anytime God interpreted something, like someone would give interpretation and say what God was trying to say through the tongues message, they would speak in an Old English accent. So God speaks exactly like Shakespearean Old English every time.
Yeah, that's got to be weird, especially considering that God primarily worked himself in the Middle East. You
Yeah,
know, you would think that it would be some kind of like kind of talk, you know?
I have never heard God talk with an Arabic voice or anything like that.
Now, you said that you were about 10 or 11 when you went through the whole baptism thing. Is that generally the age that they do that at, or do they do them younger, later?
They do it whenever the child says they're ready, basically. Some churches have age limits, but in the church that I was in, it's basically whenever the kid says that they're ready to get the baptism.
So, like, if the kid slid out and was like, "Ah," they'd be like, he's ready.
Yeah.
Dunk that bastard.
But I mean, I've seen in churches people who didn't receive it until they were like 30, and then I've seen people who got it when they were 6 or 7. It depends on the person in the church, and really the church that you're in. Some ministers, like I didn't like anybody coming forward until they were in their teen years. It was still crazy, but I didn't feel like they should enjoy the crazy until they were in their teens.
Yeah. No, I think that the teens is a really good, time, because I mean, at that point, they've definitely gotten to the point where they can really explore what they choose to believe, basically. I mean, before that, it's really just, well, my parents are Pentecostal. Maybe I should start speaking like a madman kind of deal. So, but now, as far as you as a kid growing up in a Pentecostal church, I mean, I guess like what kind of activities did you really, take part in? Like, do the Pentecostals have a really big, like, community driven kind of church? Like, do you have like cookouts, barbecues, or whatever?
That's somewhat changed since I was a kid. When I was a kid, if you were outside of the Pentecostal church, you were going to hell. We didn't care about you. But then towards the mid 90s, there started to be more and more of an outreach. And a lot of churches do put on like soup suppers and things like that for the community, but they're still very church oriented. Most of the time, they're putting on things for the church.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, like, as a Pentecostal, did they have, like, any kind of, like, church camps or anything like that, or, like, children's ministries, or was it all just kind of merged into each other?
Yeah, they have, VBS, and they have a camp that kids can go to in the summer. There's several camps around the country for the Assembly of God. But there's children's church and youth ministry. When I first started in the ministry, I was a youth minister. But there's all different facets and aged groups in the church.
Well, I'm kind of curious, like, while you were still in that mindset, I mean, how did you feel? Like, did you feel that everybody outside of the church was going to hell and why give a shit about them? Like, did you have that feeling while you were in the church, or what?
I was always trying church to do things. I would try to get us to put on suppers and things like that for the community. It's not so much that I cared about the community, but it was something to do for God. It was glorious for God to share the wealth, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh, but I don't know. I did put together a lot of fundraisers and stuff like that, can drives and things like that when I was a minister, to try to help out.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's awesome. Like even though some people may be religious, I think that they can still do good, for the
Oh
community.
yeah.
There's plenty of churches out there that run those kind of things on a regular basis and just help people out regardless, of what their faith is or their sexual orientation, all that kind of stuff. And it really does kind of put it in perspective, like the fact that that they can do good things for other people. It's just that there are some people that seems to be a bit more bigoted,
Yeah.
and they really push their own personal bias, using their religion. So you were a kid, you were Pentecostal, you were going through it. What made you decide to be a minister exactly? Like, was it your whole double Elijah hood?
It was my grandfather prophesying over me and saying I was going to be a minister, and I was going to be the next Elijah, and just that was told to me every time I saw my grandfather, that you're meant to be a minister. You're going to be a minister. God's not going to bless you unless you join the ministry. Things like that. So really, it was just okay. Well, life's kind of shitty right now. Maybe if I join the ministry, it'll get better.
Right. Okay. And so, what was your experience like going through, becoming a minister? Like, was it really easy to become a minister? Did you have to go to college or what?
No, no, no. The church that I was a minister for did not believe in college learned ministers.
Oh, they don't like
They,
that book learning shit.
no, the college learned ministers was just one step right above an atheist, I think, in the church that I was a minister at. Uh, so what I did was I got my ordination through a local full gospel association, which is Pentecostal as well. And that made it to where I could preach and do any kind of ceremony that I needed to. But yeah, they did not like any college taught preachers.
Well, I mean, so they just outright rejected them. Like, if anybody come up and was like, "Well, I'm from the Bible college," they'd be like, "Well, fuck you, then. Get out the fuck out of here."
The
Like,
Bible college was worldly.
oh, was it?
Oh yeah, they had heard that there was, drinking and sex and stuff like that went on in those Bible colleges, and they were evil.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's a really big problem, well, in the college system in general, but also Christian colleges, with the sex abuse and sexual harassment and all that kind of stuff. They tend to blame the victim whenever it happens to them and everything like that. So, I know a lot of I don't know where I was going with that particular part. Okay. So now, okay. So you were a minister, you were in the ministry and everything like that. So when did you exactly start questioning like that? Like, did you start earlier in it, or was there a specific event, or what's up with that?
It was later in Thanksgiving one year. My grandmother put on a big meal and had all of her family there, her sisters and all their family. And about halfway through the meal, my great aunt called my cousin and asked him if he was going to show up. And he said no, he wasn't feeling good and that we should have a good time. Well, later on that evening, I got a call from my father telling me that my cousin had shot himself and that he was going to die. So that next Sunday, it was my job, because most of my family was members of my congregation, was to go up and give an inspiring message to try and comfort them and things like that. And the first thing I hear when I walk through the door is two elderly women talking about how sad it is that my cousin is in hell and that there's no chance he'll ever enter heaven. And at that moment, it was like a switch went off in my brain. Don't remember much about the service, but I remember saying that if God sends people like my cousin to hell, that's not a God that I should worship, and I don't even know that he exists. And it just totally stunned everyone. I think they thought it was just me grieving because I didn't get kicked out, but that really started the ball rolling.
Oh, wow. I mean, that had to have been tough. I mean, I know that you said that you don't really remember the service all that much, but I mean, like, I guess what was the aftermath like of that?
The aftermath of it was really just, like I said, I think people thought that I was just grieving at the time. They didn't anything had actually in my brain that I had gone, okay, that's shit. That doesn't make any fucking sense. God's love, but he's sending my cousin who was tortured and tormented his entire life and had depression and then took his life. He's sending him to hell for eternity. That's fucked up. And I think I took a couple weeks off after that. We had another associate minister there that preached, but then I started preaching a couple weeks after that. But it really changed the way my ministry went from that point on, and I started doubting more and more.
Okay. So, how old were you when this was going on? Like, was this recent, or was this like some years ago?
It was about 6 years ago when it actually happened.
Okay.
No, I'm lying there. It was about 5 years ago. Sorry. But I'm sorry, I forgot the question now.
Oh, I was just asking, like, how long ago it happened in 5 years. So,
Yeah.
after that, like, I guess, what really got you to, I guess, leave the ministry? Like, what you have been contemplating all this stuff for a while, and I'm just kind of wondering, like, what kind of tipped you over that edge? Going from just lightly kind of questioning it to just full blown, like this opening the Bible and being like, you see this is bullshit kind of thing.
Well, to tell you the complete and honest truth on that, I actually started reading and trying to understand the Bible. Before that, I had read the Bible time and time again. I had come up with hundreds upon hundreds to thousands of sermons and things like that, and picked scriptures out, and I'd read through the Bible, but I had never read it to understand it. And the second I actually started reading it to understand it, I was like, a lot of this is bullshit.
Right.
And over time, more and more of it was bullshit. And then I realized at one point, I'm like, I don't believe any of this crap anymore.
So that's really interesting to hear, because you hear a lot of people being like, "Oh, you just need to read the Bible. You read the Bible, you'll be a Christian. I can guarantee it." But it's like, most atheists have read the Bible, and that's the exact reason why we don't believe it. Thank you, heathens, for making it to the end. I hope you enjoyed this part of the interview. If you want to, go ahead and subscribe so that you can catch the next part of the interview next week. Please, while you're down there, leave a comment with which part of Godless Iowan's story you really resonated with or you really liked. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens!